Welcome to Inspiration and Transformation from the Banks of the Ganga with Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati, an American sannyasi living at the Parmarth Niketan ashram in Rishikesh, India. Sadhvi is president of the Divine Shakti Foundation, a charitable organization bringing education, vocational training, upliftment, and empowerment programs to women and children. Sadhvi is also Secretary General of the Global Interfaith Wash Alliance and Director of the world-famous International Yoga Festival. Join the musings of an American sannyasi as Sadhvi shares the wisdom and teachings of her guru, His Holiness Pujya Swami Chidanand Saraswati Ji.
Welcome everyone to Inspiration and Transformation from the holy banks of the sacred Ganga River in the land of Rishikesh, India. Swami said to me, the best mantra to use is your own name. He said that it's not necessary to ask for a mantra, that your own name was given by your mother and therefore was the best name to use. Okay, so that's very sweet. There's two aspects to this. Can you use your own name as a mantra, and would that be the best mantra? So the two pieces of this. Piece number one is the concept of connecting with God. Any name, any word works. There's nothing that's better, there's nothing that's worse. Because all names, all forms, everything is God. And so whatever appeals to you, whatever mantra appeals to you, if it's said with love and it's said with devotion, that's the best. There's a beautiful story that Pujya Swamiji shares of a little boy who goes to temple, and it's time for the silent prayer. And everybody closes their eyes and does their prayers, their mantras in their mind. But this young boy, he doesn't know any prayers or mantras. And so he closes his eyes and he says to God, God, I don't know any prayers. I don't know any mantras. All I know are the ABCs that I learned in school. He said, but I know that all the prayers and all the mantras are made up out of this alphabet. And so I'll just sing you the ABCs, and you make whatever prayer you like best. And Pujya Swamiji shares that story always with the moral and the message that God loves this little boy with his ABCs more than people able to chant the most complex mantras, but who do it without any love, without any feeling, who do it just as ritual. So one half of the answer is, it doesn't matter what you're saying, doesn't matter what word, doesn't matter what phrase, your own name, a name of God that you love. Chair, 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 couch, couch, couch. I mean, as long as what's in your mind is God, and as long as what's in your heart is love and devotion, that's what matters. That's one half of the answer. But then the other half of the answer is the science of the Vedic mantras, which is a science that is deeper and higher and more profound and more powerful than just love and devotion. Yes, if you say it without love and devotion, the power isn't there. But if you've got the love and you've got the devotion, and you add in the science of sound, these mantras themselves actually are alchemically able to change us and transform us. That's the Vedic science. The mantras that are chanted in the Havan ceremonies, in the pujas, in the artis, the mantras that are given to us from the scriptures, the mantra that the Guru intuits is the right science for you, has a power in it that just amplifies your love and devotion. And so why not use that additional power if we have access to it? Before Puja Swamiji would give me my mantra, I remember for at least a couple of years, I wanted a mantra, and he just kept telling me, just wait. But I had a mala. And I thought, well, I had heard him tell his story about the little boy. And I thought, well, all right, I know a little more than the alphabet, but not much. I didn't know any actual mantras or any actual Sanskrit at that time. And I thought, well, he always emphasizes that love and devotion is the most important. And so for about 2 years, my mantra was just, I love you, Krishna. I love you, Krishna. I love you, Krishna. I love you, Krishna. And I did that for a good, almost 2 years until he would actually give me a mantra. And yes, it was powerful. It was wonderful. I connected in love and devotion. But the power that you feel when you actually have a Sanskrit mantra that carries within it not only love, not only devotion, not only God, who of course speaks every language and understands even our unspoken prayers, the prayers of our heart, the silence. But when you add in the science of sound, which sadly the West hasn't yet, or at least the young West, the American West, hasn't yet really figured out how to tap into. When you add that science in, it's even more powerful. So I would say your own name isn't the worst mantra I've ever heard. It's certainly a very sweet sign of respect to your mother. It's a sweet sign of respect to the divine within. But if you have the opportunity to have a mantra that carries within it the alchemic power of the Vedas, of Sanskrit, why not? Why not use all of the possible Shakti that we have to connect, to open, to unfold, to awaken? If you don't want to chant the Sanskrit, if you don't want a mantra from the Vedas, then by all means, chant whatever appeals to you. Puja Swamiji once gave a Christian woman the mantra Om Christ. Fantastic mantra, if that's your tradition. So everything works, and in that same way, your own name would work. As long as you're able to love yourself with deep devotion. But that's sort of an interesting dilemma that it would put us in. I won't go into that whole aspect, but that could lead to an interesting overlap of narcissism with devotion that I'm not sure would necessarily be beneficial unless you were really being guided by a guru or by someone who was helping you understand where devotion to God ended and narcissism was beginning.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single...
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Alaya, in the circle on Sunday 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Hi, this is Christina Ricci with RAIN. Every 2 minutes, another American is sexually assaulted. If you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, you are not alone. Help is just a call or click away through the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Please call 1-800-656-HOPE, that's HOPE, or visit RAIN.org, that's RAINN.org.
Brought to you by RAIN and this station.
Welcome back to Inspiration and Transformation. I'm so glad to have you all back here with me. In any campaign, you have to have a lot of strategies. You've got different populations. You've got educated populations. You have non-educated populations. You have older populations. You have younger populations. You have urban populations, rural populations, religious populations, non-religious populations. So you have a lot of different strategies. The strategy that you've just mentioned about not dumping it on my mother is absolutely one that is widely used. We take it even another step to help it really bring it home to people. Is in this country, what is deeply believed is that, and across the world, but here specifically, where God lives, where we worship God, that place is a temple. In traditions where we don't necessarily see God in that form, it's not necessarily a belief. So for example, we don't necessarily believe that Jesus Christ is there in that particular cross. It's a way to remember him, a way to connect with him, a way to remind ourselves, but you don't necessarily say, right here in this, which I'm holding, is Jesus Christ, specifically or personally. Here in this country, because there's such a widespread tradition of worshiping the divine in form, through form. They're not actually worshiping idols. This is something we remind people and explain so frequently. It's not worshiping the idol. It's worshiping the ideal of the divine through the statue. But there is a very deep belief that the divine has infused that image with divine presence. And I mention this because when we then construct temples around the image, the belief is the divine lives here, is actually present in this temple in this form. And the way that we take that campaign is we say, look, you come to the banks of Ganga, we perform arati. Well, arati is performed to the divine. In a Krishna temple, people perform arati to Krishna. In a Ram temple, people are going to perform arati to Ram. In a Shiva temple, people will perform arati to Shiva. When the guru goes into someone's home, people perform arati to the guru as an embodiment of the divine. So arati is performed to the divine. So we perform arati to Ganga. Means Ganga is the goddess, which means that her banks and her waters, her form, are a temple. If God lives there, this place is a temple. And nobody could imagine, nobody of any religion could imagine walking into their priest or their minister or their rabbi or their imam and saying, excuse me, but I don't have anything to do with my household waste. I have no place to put it. Would you mind if I brought it here and just kind of dumped it on the floor? We couldn't conceive of even asking the question, let alone actually doing it. No one would say, God, I'm looking for a place to hook up my household sewage to. Would you mind if I just ran a pipe and it just, came right here into the temple, into the church, into the mosque, into the Gurdwara? The concept is sacrilege. And so helping people understand. Because see, the mom analogy, that's just my physical mom. People would say, well, that's just because that's my mom in her body. But Ganga's the goddess. Ganga's the divine mom. So she's not subject necessarily to the rules that one would think apply to a physical person. Ganga doesn't get sick. Ganga doesn't need a hand across the street. Ganga, But when you talk about a temple, then suddenly everybody gets it. If we are worshiping Ganga in any way, we're offering flowers, we're offering prayer, we're offering light. Well, we do that to the divine. And everyone agrees, yeah, Ganga's the goddess. Well, if she's the goddess, it means that this whole form, whether there's 4 walls or not 4 walls, this is a temple. And this has actually been a campaign that has worked very, very well. This is what Puja Swamiji did here on our God. When he first got here in 1969, there were no ghats on the banks of Ganga. It was nothing but rocks. And every morning people would go to the banks of Ganga to go to the toilet. And it disturbed him deeply, deeply from the beginning. And so he started a variety of different awareness campaigns, education campaigns. Population was nothing at that point, so it wasn't like a massive community issue. It was more for him an aesthetic issue and a deeply spiritual issue of, this is our mother. How can you poop in her? He then built toilets, attached bathrooms in all of the rooms in the ashram, which itself was a revolution. People thought that was just the grossest thing they could imagine. How can you possibly put a toilet where you sleep? Literally. And this is not 100 years ago. This is 30 years ago. Mid-80s. 1980s, not 1880s. I mean, those of us from abroad, you think, you're right, 1880s you mean, right? No, 1980s. People couldn't imagine. When he came in, there were not attached bathrooms in the rooms. People could not imagine having an attached bathroom. This is gross. We'll go outside. It's pure. It's beautiful. On the banks of Ganga, it feels so clean and fresh. So he then tried a new campaign, which was to begin the Ganga Arti, which served 2 purposes. One, of course, was to revitalize the devotion that people have for Ganga, to gather them every evening together in prayer, and the very simple awareness that no one is going to poop in the morning where they pray in the evening. That by reminding people this is a temple, literally, bring them here to pray, perform the yagna ceremony, the fire, perform the arti. This is now a temple. And he then covered it with marble. And the open defecation just stopped. Not because people wouldn't defecate on marble, but because this was now a temple. We come here to pray in the evening. And so the campaign actually has been very, very successful. And now you'll see up and down the banks of Ganga, all of the ashrams have built these ghats. He encouraged all of the ashrams, build ghats, marble it over. It's beautiful. People love it. They can sit more comfortably on the banks of Ganga. They can meditate. He's encouraged everybody start arti. When we first started, we were the only one. For years, we were the only one. Now, over the last few years, if you look up and down Ganga while arti is going on, you'll see Oh, up there's one. Oh, up there's another one. Oh, down there's another one. And sometimes people say to him, well, don't you mind that these other people have also started Aarti? And he always says, this is what I've been trying to convince people to do for decades. When we have Aarti up and down the banks of Ganga, everyone will remember this is a temple. And when everyone remembers it's a temple, we don't need to put up signs that say don't defecate here. Because it doesn't matter how badly you have to go, nobody in any city of the world, no matter how desperate they are, no matter how badly they're looking for a bathroom and can't find one, is going to walk into their nearest temple or a church or a mosque and squat down and go to the toilet. Form and content, okay, we don't throw our trash in Ganga. Whether it's because I recognize the content as divine and therefore the place is a temple, or whether because I recognize that people depend on the form and therefore to protect them, I'm not going to dump my trash. But as you so rightly mentioned, we have this third dimension, and into that third dimension comes our much deeper existence. Because if you look at what it is that is removing Ganga, it's us. It's us. It's development, as you say. It's choices. It's us saying, for example, we want to farm in a chemical heavy way, in a non-organic way. We want to farm crops that are not right for this area because this is what's lucrative. We want to farm with heavy fertilizer use because it's going to grant me a more lucrative harvest. And therefore, we are going to divert a larger amount of the water from our river into our farms. There's a finite amount of water. Either she's running in the riverbeds or she's irrigating our fields. And as we are developing, these are choices. Again, there's not a moral police that gets to say, thou shalt do this or that. God has granted us all free will. Some could argue that wasn't necessarily the smartest thing. But nonetheless, we've been granted free will. We have it. It's in our hands. And when prophets, my prophet today, this month, this year, overshadow the greater good, when I look at the cost of something as being only that which it costs me, but not that which it costs the earth, the water, all of the other people with whom I share this earth and this water, well, then I make decisions like, let's get into agriculture of crops that require gobs of water in places where we don't have gobs of water, crops that are not meant to be grown here because they require lots of water. This is not a water-intensive place. Crops that take chemical fertilizers. Let's use chemical pesticides. All of this ends up diverting our water. Let's divert it to create electricity. Because what we need are more and more things that run on electricity. Bigger, bigger, more, more. We too should become like a city that never sleeps. We too should have a city where the lights are on 24 hours a day. It's our choice. And what's happening, the other aspect of what's happening, of course, is as the water level is going down, even if the pollutants were not increasing, even imagine for a moment, this isn't true, but even imagine for a moment that we were able to stabilize the amount of pollution. Well, the percentage of pollution still would continue to increase because the amount of water is going down. So the dilution is in such a way that even if the toxins that we were pouring into her stayed the same, it's still a greater dilution, a greater percentage. And the other major aspect that this relates to within development has to do with industry. Because the greatest contributors to the pollutants in Ganga are the industries, the tanneries. Not only the tanneries, they're a huge percentage of it, but not exclusively. Well, they produce in what we call the law of supply and demand. As long as there's demand for more, cheaper, people are going to keep cutting corners. They're going to do whatever they can do to make the cost cheaper because now they're in competition. And this is because of our internal lack of sense of abundance, lack of fullness, lack of enoughness, that I need to buy more and own more in order to feel full, in order to feel content. I mean, do we all really need that many pairs of shoes? Do we really need this many pairs of pants? Are we really living in a way that with everything we buy, we look not only at the price tag on the item, but we look at the whole chain of who and what has been impacted by giving me this item at such a cheap price? Well, somebody's paid for it. If it's not me, who's paying for it? And it's an existential dilemma. It's a spiritual dilemma. It's a human moral dilemma. Because as long as I'm looking for more, cheaper, that's the demand. And yeah, we can blame the courts for not passing stricter laws, but the truth is the laws are there. We can blame the government for not properly enforcing it. They're doing their best. But what that does is absolves us of the responsibility. And the truth is that economics are where it's all about. I remember when I was young, before I became a vegetarian when I was 15. So sometime prior to being 15, I used to eat tuna fish. And I learned one day that the tuna industry, that the people who fish for tuna lives around dolphins, because the dolphins eat the tuna. So wherever there's lots of tuna, there's also lots of dolphins. And the way that the tuna fishermen work, they're not going out with fishing poles and lines and trying to, catch a tuna. They go out in these huge boats. They drop these nets that sometimes are miles long. And they go along the ocean, again for miles, and then they pull up their nets and they throw away everything that's not what they're fishing for. If I'm a tuna fisherman, I only want tuna. If I'm a salmon fisherman, I only want salmon. Everything else that's in their nets gets tossed. But of course, by that time, it's already died. And the amount of dolphins who die in tuna fishermen's nets is phenomenal. But I share the story because, so I was maybe, 10, 11, 12, whatever I was. And I learned this, and what I was told was, you can buy, Greenpeace, I think it was, ran a huge campaign, dolphin safe tuna. So they weren't saying don't eat tuna, they weren't trying to turn everybody vegetarian, but on cans of tuna fish, there would be a little logo with a picture of a dolphin that said dolphin safe tuna. As in, no dolphins have been killed in catching this tuna. And everybody would only buy dolphin safe tuna. And the industry literally had to change. Similar campaign happened when Coors Beer wouldn't pull out of apartheid South Africa. Everybody else had pulled out. All the other big multinational companies had pulled out in order to put pressure on the South African government. Coors wouldn't pull out. It was too economically lucrative to keep being able to employ cheap African labor. governments put sanctions, when everybody tried to put sanctions, nothing worked. Finally, people just boycotted Coors beer. Nobody would buy a Coors beer. And what all sorts of other sanctions couldn't do, economics did. And I share these two examples because we, the consumer, we have the power. If we created a situation where we said, okay, we're not saying don't buy leather. We're not, again, as I said, the moral police. But could you have Ganga safe leather? Could you have a certification whereby those industries who produced leather without one drop of waste going into Ganga or into the groundwater got some sort of a stamp? And then a nationwide campaign went out that we would only buy Ganga safe leather? But as long as we're clamoring for more and more, cheaper and cheaper, people are screaming about the government's failure to clean Ganga. And then they go out and everybody wants leather car seats and leather handbags and leather shoes and leather belts. And it's like we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're literally going out and with our rupees supporting the very industry that we're over here picketing against. And so what it gives us is the opportunity to really realize, wow, I've got the opportunity to make a difference. Can I start demanding organic food? Can I insist that my local grocer carries organic food? Am I prepared to pay an extra few rupees for organic food until it becomes mainstream? Can I think 10 times before I decide I need a new mobile? Or a new anything? Is the old one still good? Am I buying it because I really need it? Or am I buying it because I'm bored or I'm depressed or I'm frustrated? Am I buying it to fill a hole in my heart that it's not going to be able to fill anyway? Because if I am, I lose anyway. And then Ganga loses. And everybody loses. And this is really where you could say spirituality and activism come together. Because, yeah, we can scream about tanneries and we can scream about industries, but as long as my favorite form of therapy is shopping therapy, I'm creating more problems than I'm solving. But the only antidote to the need for shopping therapy is spirituality. Because that which is leading me to feel like, oh, if I just could have another pair of shoes, I would feel so much happier. Oh my God, I had a really bad fight with my husband or my wife. I'm going to go shopping. And I come home with 5 bags of goods and I feel better. Well, as long as that's what I'm doing to self-soothe, as long as my concept of self is being filled by things outside me, well, those things are being produced in industries that are destroying our environment. And whether it's Ganga here, or whether it's our ozone layer across the planet, that which is happening today is happening as a direct result of our actions. And this is not that we should all walk out of here and feel horrendously guilty, but we should walk out and feel incredibly empowered. Because it's not just about our state governments, it's not just about the courts, it's not just about what big multinationals do. It's actually about the decisions that we all make every day. What do I buy? What do I wear? What do I eat? How do I live? How do I fill my holes?
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization Their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Like Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati with inspiration and transformation. How can you move on after suffering a lot of stress? Well, Ganga, the divine sacred river flowing in front of us, gives us such a perfect model for this. As you know, I assume most of you know, we're very, very active in the Ganga cleanup programs and Protect Ganga programs. And one of the things that we always remind people of is that actually all we have to stop doing is putting more pollution in. Because every year when the monsoons come, Ganga cleans herself. She's this model of forgiveness, this model of moving on, no matter what we dump in her, no matter how disrespectful and horrible we are to her. Every year the rains come and it's all clean. And if we just could stop dumping more things in her, Ganga would actually be clean. And it's the same model for when we talk about how do you move on after suffering a lot of stress. The same way Ganga does. If we stop putting more stress into our lives, then the minute that we're able to have a deep breath, the minute we're able to connect, the minute that monsoon rain is able to happen in our lives, the minute that we're able to be in an inner situation that may be connected to an outer situation as well, and it may not. Our outer situation may stay the same and only the inner has changed. But we have that experience of the flow of that new river, the flow of that new life, the flow of that awareness, the flow of love, the flow of connection. It's what we get when we meditate. It's what we get, many of us in the Arati. It's what we get by the grace of a guru. It's what we get when we experience love. And the minute that happens, it literally, like Ganga, washes all the junk away. It's just important not to redump it. So don't hold on to that which has happened before. Oh my God, that was so stressful. How am I going to move on? Well, the sheer fact that the stress was in the past tense, that I say that was so stressful, means it's over. Whether it's from 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago or 50 years ago. In all cases, it's in the past. And we look at Ganga, whether you dumped something in her 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago, or 50 years ago. It is gone from this moment. From where I am, it's gone. If it was only 5 minutes ago, it's somewhere closer to me downstream, but it's not here. It's not in my experience of Ganga. And in the same way in our lives, when something has happened, the question is, how can I, allowing it to flow, so that in this moment I'm able to be new? Sure, there are things that happen that we have to respond to and deal with and address and solve and whatnot. But that's logistic. From a spiritual perspective, it's about how can I be new in this moment? Okay, that happened. But in this moment, it's not happening. In this moment, I have the opportunity to experience stillness. I have the opportunity to experience peace. I have the opportunity to experience grace. The fact that at some point in the past there was stress does not have to be part of my reality right now. Now again, I've simplified it for most of us. There are, of course, situations in which the stress of the past was painful, was traumatic enough, was big enough, impactful enough, that it has changed us in some way. That it has created sanskaras or energetic or neuronal patterns that we have to then address. But that's what our spiritual practice is for. It's what our psychological practice is for. But in no case do we have to bring the stress of the past into this moment. I may have to work with creating a new neuronal network, a new pattern, a new sanskara. But what's most important is not to bring that stress into this moment. And I have the power to do that because it isn't here. And if I find it here, it's because I have grabbed it out of the past and brought it here, which of course we do because we want to hold on. But that's a different question, a different situation. For this one, remember it's of the past. Remind yourself that the present moment does not have that stress. That regardless of how bad the past was, it is not happening in this moment. And I have the opportunity, the invitation, to live in this moment, not in that one. And again, I may have to deal with some things from that moment, psychologically, logistically, but I don't have to live in it. My life should be in this moment. And a lot of the beautiful rituals that we're able to do, whether it's yagna, whether it's offering something to Ganga, whatever it is, forgiveness, is literally the equivalent of the monsoon season coming. That cleans it all out of us. And then with our spiritual practice, with our dedication, with our commitment, with our vows, we don't bring that back into our life. So that the river of our life can flow freely and cleanly and purely within us.
This is OTR FM, part of the IOM radio network.
The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
When I broke my foot,
for leaving me alone when I wanted to be alone.
And now, as a grown-up, I'm thankful for being able to take care of you, my dear mom, for taking you to your therapies, for understanding that sometimes you simply want to be alone.
Roles change without us noticing. That's why AARP gives you the information to provide even better care for your loved one. Visit aarp.org/caregiving. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati, and thanks for coming back and joining us for more of inspiration and transformation. What should I do if I can't introvert myself even after so many spiritual practices? Why am I not getting forward? So I think what he means by not able to introvert himself is probably not able to go within, not able to still the mind, not able to connect with that part inside of ourselves. And he says, of course, even after so many spiritual practices. And sometimes the effort with which we do the practice can actually end up being the impediment to the goal we're looking for. And that sounds backwards, I know. But when we remember that this ultimate goal is connecting with who we are. So it's not about becoming something new. It's not about learning some new skill that is outside of me. It's not about being born in India and learning to speak Greek that you've never heard of. It's not about being born and then learning how to play basketball. Things that you've never been exposed to. It's not that. It's simply removing that which is not self and reconnecting to the self. So there shouldn't need to be any very complex, esoteric, difficult techniques to know the self. We need to do something because we are so wrapped up in the not self. We're so wrapped up in the body, in the world around us, in our relationships. But if what we're focused on so much is the technique, is the practice, then it's no wonder I'm not able to connect deeply within. And that happens sometimes, ironically, is all my attention, all my focus goes on the technique instead of on, well, where's the technique supposed to take me? What's the end goal here? There's a great story that I love of these 3 guys who are stranded on an island. And they're scared and worried, of course. They're going to die. And they pray and pray that someone should rescue them. And one day they open their eyes and there's this canoe on the shore. And they're ecstatic and they jump in the canoe and they row themselves back to the mainland. And a few weeks later, someone sees them walking through the market, and they've got this canoe on their head. They're walking in a line, holding the canoe on their heads. And the person says, "Why are you carrying a canoe on your head?" They said, "Oh, well, this canoe, it saved our life. We were stranded on the island, and this canoe, it showed up, and it saved us." And the person said, "Well, that's great, but why are you carrying it on your head through the marketplace?" And again, they said, "Well, God, this canoe, it saved our life, and we were stranded, and we're so indebted to this canoe." And the reason that I love the story is, yeah, the canoe saved their life. It's great. It was a miracle of grace. But now it's fulfilled its job. The point of the canoe was to get them across the water back to the mainland. To continue to carry a canoe on your head, walking through the marketplace, makes no sense. And it actually ends up handicapping you, because there's not much you can do when you've got both your arms up and you're carrying a canoe. And the same thing happens a lot with our attachment to specific practices or specific techniques. Is it becomes about the practice. It becomes about the technique rather than being about where we're going. Because the truth is, it doesn't matter whether it was a canoe. It could have been anything. It could have been a raft. It could have been jet skis. It could have been a rowboat. It could have been a yacht. I mean, it doesn't matter what vehicle it was. What matters is they were able to use it to get across. And the same is true with our spiritual meditation techniques. It's about getting us back to the self. But if we're so focused on the technique, then rather than becoming one with the self, we're becoming one with the technique. Like these guys became so one with their canoe that now they, carried it with them through the marketplace. And so if you find that you're not moving forward, ask yourself, well, how much have I merged with my true self versus how much have I merged with a technique? How much have I merged with a stringent practice rather than with myself? And can I soften that? Can I bring some just awareness? Loving awareness if I've got the heart for it. Open-hearted, spacious awareness. Into that space. Because physics tells us the universe hates a vacuum. So where space is created, something goes in to fill it. And the same thing happens in our meditation and our spiritual practice. The more space we're able to create, the more we're able to get out of the way. Get our minds out of the way, get our thoughts out of the way, get our egos out of the way, get our shopping lists out of the way. The more we're able to get them out of the way, the more space is created. And into that space, grace flows. And so if that space is so occupied by, I've got to remember the technique in which I lost count. What number was I on? That's now what's occupying my space. How many times I'm supposed to chant my mantra, how many breaths, what count of the inhalation, what count of the exhalation. I mean, they're beautiful techniques. But like the canoe, they're techniques to just take us across the water. Not techniques for us to get stuck into. And ultimately the goal is just, how can I create space in which who I really am, that truth can emerge. Because it's there. We don't need to do something fancy or esoteric in order to make it there. It's already there. What we need is some assistance removing the stuff that blocks it from our vision. And that's the ego, and that's the illusion, and that's the expectations, and that's the anger, and that's our grudges, and that's all this stuff. So that's what the techniques help us do. But you don't want to substitute one thing that's filling your mind for another thing that's filling your mind, because in either case the mind is full. And really what we want to do is create stillness and space. And so for my brother online who's asking this question, I'd say, don't worry for a moment about the practice. You mentioned you've done so many practices. Take a break from the practice. And just sit with the self. Just go within. Allow that space to be created. And see what flows into it. This brings to a close this hour of inspiration and transformation. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad to be together with you all each week. And I look forward to being together again next Thursday, same time, on OMTimes Radio.